join us in taking the pledge against the demon drink. This will push him too far, Eve. He'll turn his back on you, and worse still, he'll forbid me from ever seeing you. Please unpack your things and stay, for my sake if nobody else's." Margaret walked towards her daughter and held her arms out to hug her. Eve was her only child, born to her late in life when hope had nearly gone of her ever being a mother. Because of that, perhaps, they had both been too strict with her, and now she was rebelling against her upbringing, belittling her life with them at home, and it hurt Margaret deeply. "No, ma'am, I'm going." Eve picked up her bag and, taking advantage of her mother being off guard, made for the front door, opening it quickly and looking around hastily as her heartbroken mother sobbed in the dark interior of the cottage. "I'll send word as to where you can find me. I'm sorry, ma'am. I love you." Eve shed tears too, as she set off down the road that led out of the small mining village of Rothwell, not daring to look back at her mother, who was now standing in their front garden, shouting for her to return home. It would only take a second of weakness, and she'd be running back to her mam, begging her forgiveness. She had to be strong and look forward to a new life, away from the strict upbringing that she had endured with her Methodist family. Although she had always been shown love and kindness, Eve yearned for some excitement, dances and young men courting her, and frivolous dresses instead of being told to be demure and not to be too forward in the company of village boys she'd known all her life. A life in the growing town of Leeds, with its many shops and trades, was an opportunity to see something of the world, something far more alluring than being a parlour-maid to the gentry at Temple Newsome and having to be subservient to all around her. Determined to reach the bustling centre of opportunity called Leeds before nightfall, Eve walked quickly, her tears diminishing the nearer she got to the town. She needed to find somewhere to stay the night, and in the morning she would set off on her quest to find work. She'd read in old copies of the Sheffield Telegraph, passed on to the family by their minister, that industries were springing up daily in the town, that girls like her were needed to work in factories and shops, and that there was no end of possibilities once you had made your way into the bustling heart. You could buy a pie for next to nothing, and that on every street there was something called a doss house, where you could lay your head for a penny or two. Eve smiled to herself. She'd saved up a penny here and penny there over the last few months, and now she had as much as 2 whole shillings safely placed in the pocket of her skirt. That would see her with a bed and her stomach filled for at least the next few nights, just until she'd found herself employment, and then she would look for a more permanent place to stay. Having lived with her mam and dad all her life, she was eager for her own home, where she could come and go as she liked, and not have to listen to sermons from the good book and be quiet as her father chastised her for not paying attention. Life was going to be good, she thought, as she climbed the brow of the hill and looked out into the distance at the town that lay in front of her. Eve stood for some minutes looking at the scene, the many houses and factories, mills with their tall chimneys belching out smoke, enshrining the town in a magic cloak of mystery. There were canals that twisted and meandered across the land, busy with barges filled with goods of all kinds, and from this distance the townfolk looked like ants, busy going about their work. There were pedlars travelling to and from Leeds, with laden pack-horses or carts brimming with wares, all part of this thriving place where wealth and opportunity lay. She breathed in and sighed, shaking her head and trying to forget the vision of her mother crying and begging her not to leave home. What did her mam know? She'd never wanted any other life than the one she had in Rothwell. She'd never felt how Eve felt, stifled by the mundane life of being a country girl. But even so, Eve could feel the tears welling up in her throat as she remembered her mother's loving words and kisses. She loved her mam, and she hoped that one day Margaret would understand her need for freedom. Her father, on the other hand, she knew would simply be furious that she had gone. Knowing him too well, she also knew her mother's warning would come true. She would not be welcome if she were to return home. From now on she was on her own, and she would have to make the best of it. But it was a challenge that she was determined to embrace with open arms, she thought, and she went on her way, smiling at her fellow travellers as she walked the last 4 miles to her new life. Eve stood on Crown Point Bridge as she took in the sights of the busy town. She had been to Leeds just once before with her parents, but only as a child.